following is brought to you by Mission Church. For more resources, please visit www.missionchurchsa.org. Thank you for listening.
How you feeling this morning? You ready to get into God's Word? All right, let's dig in. If you're just joining us, we started a series called Tough Choices. It's just a journey through Proverbs. We're taking selected Proverbs out to really address life's choices. We're kind of preparing ourselves here in the beginning as we go through 3 months of Proverbs and developing a foundation. Last Sunday, we covered the fear of the Lord, which is the beginning of wisdom. So, Proverbs being a book of wisdom, you have to first go there before any of it will work. So, we started with the fear of the Lord last Sunday. Today, to help us understand wisdom, we're going to talk about its opposite, foolishness, so we can really understand what wisdom is, or at least what it's not. The best way probably to define wisdom is first to look at its opposite, which is foolishness. So what are we going to learn today from the Bible on what it says about foolishness? Well, I think what the Proverbs say on fools, as we travel through it, will bring us through 3 movements. Number 1, how to identify a fool. That's clear. The Proverbs helps us there. Number 2, how to avoid the 3 flavors of foolishness. There are really 3 broad categories of foolishness. There's more than 3 types, but 3 broad categories that Proverbs gives us. And then last, the fool that we are to be. So how to identify a fool, avoiding the 3 flavors of foolishness, and then the fool we are to be. Let's start with how to identify a fool. Now, what is a fool? A fool, according to the Bible, is someone who is seriously out of touch with reality. What's a fool in our common language? Someone who's out of touch with reality. It's the same thing. Someone who ought to know better. So there's 2 aspects to being a fool: being seriously out of touch, and you ought to know better. So, for example, take a 4-year-old who picks up a hot iron and burns his hand. You say, "Oh man, you should have kept the hot iron out of his reach." You wouldn't call the 4-year-old a fool. But if a 12-year-old picks it up, or an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old, you would call him a fool. My son, middle son, was playing football for a team, and I was assisting as a coach, assisting the head coach. And there was a day where the coach wanted me to really show the kids what it looked like to go out for a pass. So on this one particular day, I don't know what came over me, but all of a sudden I was 16 again in my head, right? So I'm out of shape. I know, but can't do anymore. So I run the route. I go up for a pass, and it's a little bit overthrown, and I dive for it, okay? So, and to catch it with one hand, I think I catch it, at least in my memory I caught it, and I landed on my ankle, twisted it, fell over, and it had some 40-year-old moans. I get up and look over, and I see these kids with their mouths gaping and the other dad's gaping like, "What are you doing?" My son, trying to show respect with his head hung in shame, was like, "Dad, that really was stupid." So he was right. Now, why was he right about that? Why was he right? Because I was a little out of touch with the reality of what kind of shape I'm in, right? And I ought to know better than to do that. If you're going to do that, do it when no one's looking. Don't do it right then, right? It's just common sense, all right? So it was a foolish thing. A fool is someone who's out of touch with reality but should know better. And we know not only in the physical world is this true, we can see that with plain common sense, but also there's a moral and spiritual order to things that we can not sync up with, just like in the physical world. If you always put individual happiness, your own happiness, above everyone else's or above the common good, over the community, if you always choose selfishness or your personal fulfillment over the best for others, there's going to be a breakdown in relationship. There's going to be a breakdown if that happens, if it's widespread in societal structures. That's because there's a moral order to things. It doesn't matter what country you live in, what language you speak. There's a certain order that must be recognized. And when you don't recognize that order, that reality, when you're out of touch with it, you know better, and you do it anyway, you're called a fool. So the idea that you can live any way you want and everything's going to work out to your happiness is just plain wrong because of this order created by God. You've got a physical order, you've got a moral order, you've got a social order, you've got a spiritual order. If you're going to live a wise life, you must submit and live in accord with that order. You can't just determine what is right or wrong for you because there's this givenness by God in the world. Okay? And if you try to act as if there's no God-created order there and just live any old way you want, make up the rules as you go, the Bible would call you, and most people with any age on them would call you a fool. Bad things are going to happen to you. So what we're describing here is also what we might call the relativist over here on the left. All right? So there's one fact of reality that we see here. One fact of reality, and that is God created people in the universe and gave them a certain order. We're to sync up with it. But really, there's two basic facts of reality. And biblically, a fool doesn't recognize one or the other. They'll get one and not get the other, but they never get both. And that second basic fact on reality is God's creation, this created order that He's made, has been corrupted or broken. We see that in the beginning of the Bible in Genesis chapter 3. In chapter 1 and 2, God created this order. It's good. It's working perfectly. Mankind screws it up in the Garden of Eden, and then it's broken. It's been broken ever since. Jesus comes to redeem it. Okay? That's the gospel. So the second fact of reality is God's created order has been corrupted or broken. Some of you new to church, Bible, or God are like, what does that mean? Exactly. And it means, even though there's still an order that God's created in the world, bad things are still going to happen to you even when you do right. That's the bottom line. That's what it really means. Even if you sync up with God's order, the created order is not working properly, bad things are still going to happen. Proverbs chapter 15:25. Look at it on the screen. There is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. Some of you heard this verse. Some of you grew up in a religious home. You heard your parents say this. And essentially when parents say this and they're angry, they're really saying, there's a way that seems right to me, and there's a way that seems right to you. The way that seems right to me is right, and the way that seems right to you is wrong. And then maybe they quote that verse. That's not what the verse means. Okay? Even though it's kind of funny. Proverbs, you see, is written, scattered Proverbs everywhere. You try to read it straight through, it's not a story. It's like a string of pearls, random selection just thrown out. You'll read 3 chapters later and you'll see something, you'll think, I just read that. Maybe it's the same, but it's probably similar. It's adding color to what it said before. The reason it's written that way is because the book of Proverbs was written to be read in community, in a group, and then practiced out. And then the subjects were meant to be read together and then stringed together and discussed. That's why it's written the way it is. It's a useless exercise to come listen to me and go out there and try to do it like in Taken 3, Liam Neeson says, good luck. You're not going to be able to do it. The deck's stacked against you. You'll see why here in just a moment. You have to read Proverbs in community. I'm going to show you why. Before chapter 15, on a way it seems right to man, you see this over and over for 14 chapters. There's a way that seems right to a fool, which only leads to death. We're pretty good up to that point. That makes sense, right? But then it comes in chapter 15, and there's a way that seems right to just a man. Okay? And some of you ladies are saying, yeah, I know. Fools and men. I know lots of men. Just like that. That's not what it's talking about. All right? It's not talking about men. It's men in general. It's just man in general, like men and women. Okay? But what does it mean? when it throws in everybody else. This is what it means. Okay? Fools are terrible strategists. They're bad at making plans. They don't ask for advice. They don't get coached. They don't get counsel. But even people who aren't fools, who do all those things, sometimes their plans, their strategies, their choices don't work out. You see what the Bible's saying? It's an application of the second truth. This is a message for not those on the left. This is a message for those on the right. This application of the second truth of the fallen world. It's to moralists. Anybody, no matter how hard you plan, no matter how much you read your Bible, no matter how many people you get counsel from, no matter how experienced you are in life, you can look at all the options, you can consider every course of action, you can pray about it, and still choose the destructive one and it not work out. You chalk it up to a fallen creation. So, what Proverbs is showing us is that if you lean to the left towards relativism, or if you lean to the right towards moralism, you're still a fool. You're like, man, that's harsh. No, I'm not saying that. The Bible is just saying, not that you're a terrible person, you're going to hell. It's saying you're a fool. You're stupid. That's what it's saying. If you're a relativist who says, I can really choose to live any way I want, I can make up my own mind for myself, I don't have to submit to anything else, I can determine what's right or wrong for me. If you're a relativist who doesn't live as if the world was created by a God and create a transcendent order that you have to abide by, then you're a fool. On the flip side, if you're a moralist who expects to do right and good must come as a result, as if it's a computer, that it's owed, or at least that's the way God set it up and it's supposed to work out for the good guys, if you're not willing to see that it's a fallen world, a fallen order, and you're a fallen person, no matter how hard you try to live right, things can still blow up, you're a fool. No matter how much you take care of that pregnancy, how much you raise your children right and educate them in the right way, and discipline in the right way, no matter how well you play by the rules at work, no matter how discerning you are on the front end of the relationship, everything can still go wrong. Job's friends understood that the world was created by God with divine order, but they didn't understand that it was fallen. And when Job was going through everything he went through, they said, gee whiz, Job, what's going on here? If you'll do right, your life goes right. But we're looking at you, and your life's a terrible mess. Therefore, you're not doing good enough. These were moralists. They were fools. The relativist lives as if there's not a particular order by God. They ignore it. On the other hand, the moralist lives as if the effects of the fall don't apply to them. So this is how you identify if someone is a fool. They think, feel, speak, and act as if one of these basic facts are not true. And that might be you. In fact, I would venture to say that Proverbs isn't saying that there's two kinds of people, foolish and wise, but that we can all be fools. It's an issue of degree. So now, what about this foolishness? The Bible here, all over the Bible, but especially in Proverbs, talks about it more than anywhere else in the Bible. It describes three flavors of foolishness. Okay? This will be the opposite of wise. Three flavors of foolishness given to us. I want to say up front, as I do in personal counseling with people, the Bible's not saying, and I'm not saying, having a relationship with a fool is morally wrong. But what the wisdom of Proverbs is counseling is that if you connect with them on the most important levels or in the most important things, you're foolish too, and it's not going to work out. You have to determine whether you're going to make or break the relationship. And the interesting thing about foolishness is it comes in these different varieties and it's hard to discern. You can always spot a member of one of the varieties that you don't personally relate to. The variety that The variety that really you actually have something in common with, and you may actually embody, you can't really see those people. In fact, probably you hook up with them, they become your good friends. What Proverbs will do, though, and what we're going to do in this message, is it has this sleight of hand, this turn of hand, as we're going to see. You want to avoid being too close with a fool, but hopefully you'll also see that you're a fool too. And that's what it does here. Let's start off with Proverbs 1:22. How long will you simple ones love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery and fools hate knowledge? Here we go. Here's the 3 Hebrew words behind the English here that show us the categories of foolishness. The first one, I'm not going to say the words. The first one you might call simple fools. And this also could be translated gullible. All right, so the simple or gullible, we know what that means. You've got simple fools as a category. The second one listed in this verse, which is actually the third we're going to look at, is mockers or scoffers. Okay, everybody knows what mocking is. We'll call this one the ruthless fool. And then the third one in the verses, which is the second one we'll look at, can be translated as stubborn. We'll call it the obstinate fool. All right, first let's look at the simple fool. Proverbs 14:15. A simple man believes anything, but a prudent man gives thought to his steps. So here's what a simple fool is. And I think when I was a teenager, I will admit, I was a simple fool. To be simple means you are so unformed in the mind that you can't discern between good and bad ideas, good and bad plans, good and bad relationships. Or you're so unformed psychologically that you so need approval, you so need to be cool or in the right crowd or accepted. You can't discern between good and bad relationships, good and bad friends, good and bad team members, good and bad leaders. A simple fool is someone who is too easily led, too easily influenced. The simple fools are like children who haven't really grown up. Simple fools don't stick to things. They have a problem with follow-through. Simple fools like and are attracted to the spectacular, to the sensational, to the most forceful, to the most dramatic. Simple fools, much of the culture could be qualified as this brand of foolishness. That's why marketing works so well. All the parts of the culture are easily influenced by media, by marketing, by film, by whatever the next thing is, by the persuasive speaker. Does this describe you? Does this describe someone that you're connected with at deep levels? Someone that you're invested in with heavily in business? Someone that you're mapping out your future with? The second one, the obstinate fool. Proverbs 15:5. A fool spurns his father's discipline, but whoever heeds correction shows prudence. Now, this is the essence of being a fool, really. You can't take criticism. I mean, how many of us really enjoy criticism? Seriously. Nobody enjoys criticism. No one just loves critique. I think you can learn to love it. But the essence of being a fool here is that you're very opinionated. You know everything. You know how things are supposed to be. A simple fool, when they are told that they're wrong or they're critiqued, they're devastated. However, an obstinate fool shrugs it off. It's like, whatever. That's how they respond to critique or to someone taking a different position, someone disagreeing. So there's a guy named Dr. Jerome Kagan from Harvard. He says that there's a consensus today that there's basically 3 orientations towards danger or threats, or 3 temperaments. Okay, you have the anxiety type, which basically says, hey, let's get out of here when there's a threat. Then you also have the aggressive type, which says, hey, let's get it before it gets us. Right? And then the third type is the optimistic type, and that's the one that looks at a threat and say, hey, I think this will get better. Things will get better. So now you could be any of the three, and I don't know if there's three, there may be more, but this is what this guy says. And, anxious types, if you'll think about it, that's like the right disposition and temperament to have when something truly is dangerous. Like you have the right natural temperament in that situation. When it's moderately dangerous or a moderate threat to you, then really the best one to have is the aggressive type, right? Just be yourself, and because the aggressive type says, I can handle this, and really you can. It is a threat, but you can't handle it. Naturally, you're okay. Just be yourself. The optimistic type is really good when it's the least dangerous, most stable. That's the mountain, make a mountain out of a molehill situation, where you're like, oh, this is a threat, but it's really not. Just keep the sunny side up, and it's going to get better because it's not what you think it is. The point is, in each temperament, each habit or way of dealing with a threat or a situation like that, they're right in a particular circumstance. However, they can be highly inappropriate unless you're in the right situation. Right? So, in our school system today, for instance, this has been going on for a long time. This isn't new. Teachers are taught, and the philosophy is that children should be let to be themselves and find themselves. But as I just demonstrated here, that could be a terrible mistake. Unless parents intervene, a child's natural temperament will dominate the child. And that's all they'll be in every situation, and they won't learn how to act wisely. Which good parents will show them they need to have a greater range of responses that aren't natural to them. You see, anxious people need to learn how to be bold. Bold people need to learn how to be anxious sometimes, right? Pessimists need to learn how to have hope. And chronically sunny side up, they need to worry a little about some things, all right? So Proverbs 22:15 says it all. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, not some children, in children. In other words, unwiseness is written into the heart of every kid. Which means kids grow up to be adolescents, adolescents grow up to be adults. It's bound up in us. Unwiseness. We don't just act how we are. This confirms that we start out as fools and we continue as fools. Temperament, or whatever it is, whatever test you want to take or however you want to describe yourself, is a shortcut to not using wisdom or not growing in wisdom. Where was Jesus? What temperament was he? He was none of them. The last one, ruthless fools. This is the mocker or the scoffer. And it's important to bring these people up, this fool, and some of this may be us, it may be me. I think I used to have this problem big time in my life. The Lord's really dealt with me here. That is where you look at people or situations or organizations or something different and you make fun of it, right? You critique everything. And if someone critiques you, this is how they handle criticism. They have 10 criticisms on the person who gave them a critique, ready and waiting to deliver, okay? And so the simple fool is devastated by criticism. The obstinate fool shrugs it off, doesn't believe it. And the critic here pays you back. Proverbs 21:24. The proud and arrogant man, mocker is his name. He behaves with overweening pride. So the mocker is somebody who on the surface looks very savvy, successful. Usually they can back up a lot of what they say. Sometimes they're leading our businesses. Sometimes they're elected officials. Sometimes, they're running the HOA. Sometimes they're school officials. Sometimes they're a head coach. They are good at something. It's very difficult to maintain a mocker status if you're a total chump and are losing and failing at whatever it is you're doing. Usually these people hold some possession or position of success of some sort, or at least someone looks up to them. And they can become a mocker. They're prideful. They're arrogant. Mockery is typically abusive. This is making fun of other people. And if you have a friendship or a relationship or a business partnership, or especially a romantic relationship with someone who's a mocker or a scoffer, as soon as that relationship with them doesn't pay them anymore, it's not profitable for them, as soon as that happens, they're going to drop you like a bad habit. You say, didn't our relationship mean anything? I thought I was important to this person. No, it didn't mean anything, because a mocker or a scoffer uses people. This ruthless fool, this cruel fool, is someone who is utterly to the core practical and does anything and everything in a way that pays them off. It's profitable for them. So in the short run, it's really great. It can look very good in business. They're going to be successful. You're connected to them. It can be a lot of fun, right? In the end, they're fools. Why? Because human beings were made for and need relationships that are supposed to be nurtured, not to be used. And the mocker and scoffer always sacrifices when it's inconvenient for them to maintain it. They turn, they ridicule, they scorn. They're ruthless. Human beings were made by God for relationships, and in the end, the mocker is an utter fool. Are you a scoffer or mocker? Do you move through relationships? Are they short term? When they're unprofitable, do you move away? Do you tend to be a critic on everybody else and not see the faults in yourself? Do you verbalize it? Does it stay in your mind? Are you connected at the deepest levels with someone like this? Now we say, wow, this is kind of tough. What do we do? What do we do about all this? And I think what the Bible would do is tell us that there's a type of fool that we're actually supposed to be. Okay? So if you are a fool, there's a lot of hope for you, because you can actually be a fool. We can just change the kind of fool we are. All right? So the natural response to this is, okay, I think I might share some things in common with one or two of these. I guess I need to go to church more. I'm going to read my Bible. Like Pastor Ryan says, I probably need to be a part of a community group. I'm going to get wise, grow in wisdom. I'm going to start taking criticism and all this. Guess what? If that's your plan, I'm here to tell you it's not as simple as that. It's not that simple. Look at Proverbs 8. In Proverbs 8, the writer is describing all of wisdom as a lady, personifying wisdom. Lady wisdom. Okay? And it starts off here in 27, says, "For the waywardness of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them." And it goes on to say some stuff about mockers. Literally in the Hebrew, what's being said here is, whoever listens to the words of wisdom will live in safety. And you're going to, if you don't, you're going to be destroyed. If you don't, you get knocked around because you're out of touch with reality. But whoever listens to the words of wisdom will live in safety and be at ease without fear of harm. Did you know that I don't know how many centuries later, but the Jesus Christ was quoting these proverbs and then crediting them to himself. And that he would perform this role that wisdom performs. Look at this. I mean, the gall. Look. Matthew 7. "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine," attributing the words to himself, "and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock." And they would have been thinking the rock of the Word. "The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house. Yet the house did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock." They're still thinking Proverbs, the book of Proverbs. "But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand." And then they begin to realize he's not talking about the book of Proverbs. He's talking about himself. How dare Jesus do that? Do you see that wise men traveled from far to his birth to bow down before him? When he was at the age of 12, his parents took him to the temple. They lost him. They come back. And all the wisest scholars and all the learned people are surrounding him, religious leaders, and listening to his answers and astounded by his wisdom. Mark chapter 6, verse 2, everybody said together, would listen to him teach, where did this man get this wisdom? It's so much more than the other Bible teachers. He even had the audacity in Luke 11 to look at the people who didn't believe in him and say this. Listen what he says. The Queen of Sheba will rise up and judge you on the last day because she came to hear the wisdom of Solomon. But a greater one than Solomon is here right before you. Jesus said, I am the wisdom of God. You say, okay, fine. All right, this is church. It's a Christian church. I hear what you're saying. What are we supposed to do about this? It just sounds good, but it doesn't make any sense. Okay, here's what you're supposed to do. You have to see in your mind's eye, the way you think and the way you view, that Jesus is and was the wisdom of God. And according to the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians, he says that you've got to recognize that it's foolish. He had the audacity to say that. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. If anyone wants to be wise, really wise, you must become a fool. Uh-oh. No, we just want to be wise here, right? He says you must become a fool that you be made wise. So we begin as fools, and we're going to end as fools. The only way to avoid being these three kinds of fools, Paul is saying, is to become a different kind of fool. The fool in 1 Corinthians 3. It's just a question of what kind of fool you are, or whose fool you are. Whose fool I am. Paul says through the foolishness of our preaching, people are being saved. Preaching what? Preaching Jesus. According to the world, the way Jesus was born, He came to the world, and the way that He died and left the world, it's just plain foolish. Paul recognized that. He's talking about it here in 1 Corinthians 1. If Jesus is God Almighty Himself, why did He have to come in and get beat up? Made fun of. For example, let's look at His birth. It's Christmas. I mean, hey, Jesus Christ was born in a manger. That's a trough. Flannery O'Connor put it this way. God told the world that He was going to send a king. He said it for a long time. And the world waited. The world thought a golden fleece will do for his bed, silver and gold and peacock tails. 1,000 suns and a peacock's tail will do for his sash. His mother will ride on a four-horned white beast and use the sunset for her cape. But what happened? Instead, Jesus came on cold straw. Jesus was warmed by the breath of an ox. Who is this, the world said? Who is this blue cold child in this woman, plain as the winter? Is this the word of God in the flesh? This blue cold child? Is this His will, this plain winter woman? Where is the summer bright and shiny will of God? As far as the world is concerned, folks, this is not how a king comes. This is not how a God comes. There's trumpets. There's not a manger, weak. Okay, let's see. He dies. He loses power. He's tortured. Weakness, suffering. And Paul rightly said that the world looks at that and calls it foolishness. It absolutely looks like. He says, but then he says to look at the cross. For the foolishness of God, he writes, is wiser than man's wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than man's strength. Do you know why? This is why. If you look at the cross, what do you see? If you will look to the cross of Jesus, you will see over here on your right that the law of God must be upheld. There is an order. There is an order, and justice must be done. You see that. But you also see, over here on the left, that it's screwed up. There's a fallenness. We're weak. Someone has to do it for us. I can't be a relativist anymore. I can't be a relativist anymore because I know that God has an order. I can't be a moralist anymore. I can't be a moralist because I understand that I'm saved by grace, the grace of what Jesus has done, and that I myself am fallen, living in a fallen world. Finally, there's an optimism that shoots through. It says, everybody's a fool. Everybody. I'm a fool, and there we are. Here's the ending. Everybody is a fool. You're either a simple fool, an obstinate fool, or ruthless fool. Or you can be God's fool. Here's what it means to become a Christian. First, you must repent. First, you realize that you are not wise in and of yourself, that ultimate wisdom can only come from God, and that He's all wise, and that you're not, and that we're foolish in all kinds of different stripes and different ways. We turn from our ways toward God. Repent. The second step is to believe. To believe means to put all your trust in what He says rather than what you think. That's what faith is. It is making something the object of your trust. No longer trusting the way you see things or how you think, but now trusting God as He speaks to you through His Word, through the church, which is going to directly connect you to Him and to His community of people. The last step is to follow. To follow means to begin to make change, to integrate into a new lifestyle with a new people, to begin to walk it out as you progressively deal with the fallen creation and God's order imposing itself on that creation. Jesus redeeming you along the way as you realize that it takes grace and it takes time to work out all these things in your life. Are you afraid to do that? Do you want to do that? You can't be wise if you're not willing to become a fool, a spiritual fool for Christ. First seeing that you were a fool, that you were out of touch with reality. The world, if you do this, I'm telling you, the world's going to think you're crazy, that you're nuts. You're going to start doing things that don't make sense. Are you willing to do these things? Are you willing to risk it? Are you willing to become Christ's fool? If not, I'm telling you, the Bible's telling you you're going to be some other kind of fool. You've got no choice. You've got to be a fool. Which fool are you going to be? There's really no alternative. You have to take Jesus. You have to receive Him. He says, if anyone will receive me, if anyone will listen to my message, he'll be like the wise man who builds his house on the rock. Jesus is that rock. Don't be the same old fool you've always been. Be a fool for Christ today.